Yo, what's up, boys? Coming to you here from the Post Commons mug. Might be out of business in a little bit, but still got a mug, still got coffee, so life is good. I actually just got back from a 4-day little trip with my wife and the prison bus that I told you about before that we renovated. We headed on down to, we were going to actually head to Florida. We're going to do a 10-day trip, totally get away. And then the hurricane came in, so I let my wife kind of plan. I said, we'll go wherever you want to go. So she picked Branson, Missouri. I'll be honest with you, like when she told me we were going to Branson, everybody I've ever talked to said, don't go to Branson. But, she wanted to see it. She knew about Christmas lights and stuff like that. I don't really like that stuff, but I was like, okay, babe, Branson it is. So went down to Branson. I actually found a fantastic campsite right next to Table Mountain Lake or Table something lake. It was awesome. And it was like really cool. Had an outdoor fireplace, sat down, just enjoyed the sun going down. It was like actually really cool. We played Yahtzee and just hung out with my wife. No cell phone because you can't get coverage. And then the next morning we headed off down to the Ozarks. If you've ever been to the Ozarks, beautiful, but 20 mile an hour cutbacks. Could not get the bus over 25 miles an hour, which segues into our final Sabbath talk. But, I told you that this Sabbathing lifestyle has been maybe a work of art in my life to try to just slow down. And here we are going through these 20 mile an hour switchbacks. And my wife even commented, she goes, you don't seem to be freaking out, because she's used to me like always wanting to pass people all the time. And we're just getting passed constantly. And I get to where like I don't even care. And then we're heading to a pecan farm. That was like the final destination that she picked, a pecan farm. And I made it sound like I wanted to go. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Yeah, pecans, fantastic. So we roll up into this, I don't know if you've ever seen a pecan farm. It's just like beautiful trees. And we parked the bus. There's 5 or 6 other kind of RVs. There's one other school bus kind of renovation. And sat down, found out that this young guy and his wife have 2 little kids. He's been recovering from PSTD or PTSD, whatever you call it, and was in the military. And he just said he's had a hard time, being able to hold down work. So he's just been traveling and trying to recover. He's been off the field for about 2 years. We had a fantastic just time chatting with them. They seemed really hopeful in our talk, and we exchanged information. Then, half hour later, a really nice bus rolls in, one of those marathon buses, probably a quarter mil. And my wife connected with his wife, and then he came over and we showed them our $15,000 school renovation, and then they showed us their bazillion-dollar deal, and was sitting out with him as the sun was going down. And I said, so why did you decide to do this? He goes, well, we just realized like we only had a few years left and we might as well do what we've always wanted to do. He goes, he worked for the oil company down in Texas. He said, we've never taken a break, and so we've just sold everything. We don't have a house. This is all we have. And it was just another great talk. It seemed like both these talks were about the lifestyle of peace and rest and recovery. And again, a great segue. I could, the more I'm studying about the Sabbath, the more I've been talking with you guys, the more I want to keep talking about it. But I know we need to move on. But Isaiah 58 has been hopefully a rework for you. This whole thing, honestly, is about reworking, re-architecting our entire life after the life of Jesus. And when you read this passage again out of Isaiah, if you watch your step on the Sabbath, and if you don't use my holy day for personal advantage, and if you treat the Sabbath as a day of joy, God's holy day is celebration. If you honor it by refusing to just do business as usual, I love that translation. If you honor it by refusing to just do business as usual, by making money, running here and there, then you will be free to enjoy God. This is the invitation that we have to not do business as usual. And aren't you thankful that the gospel, the story of God, is not just an afterlife story? I know if you grew up in the evangelical church, it always seemed like the kingdom of heaven, the afterlife, it wasn't really about here. It was like kind of waiting for God to come back. And yet, if you really study the teaching of Jesus, it was almost entirely about here. It was like he kind of figured that he had the afterlife taken care of for us. But all of his teaching was about here and now. That's why he said the kingdom of God is at hand. It's nigh. It's not waiting. It's not 20 years from now. Like, you can enter the kingdom any day you want. You just have to be like a little child and wake up in the morning and decide to live life according to the way of Jesus. And so that's what the gospel is for us. And so I think we're week 4, week 5 into this, because I didn't want us just to go past the Sabbath. We've been hearing about it our whole lives, and we try it, but somehow it just doesn't hit, and so we don't enjoy God. We know about God. We might even worship God. We might adjust things in our finances because of God, but we don't enjoy him, and I think that's the point of Sabbath. Jesus said this was not made for God. Like, God didn't think up the Sabbath so that he would be happy. He made it for us. It was like a gift to us. And if we can really receive it and adjust our lives to it, then some big stuff can happen. Some huge things can happen. So I wanted to give you one practical and then a thought just about how to wrap this up. And I want to talk about downsizing. We don't really get into the practical enough about this, but the Sabbath for me, and probably for many of you, was always this utopian idea that you kind of figure, well, it was written 2,000 years ago when people basically all hung out in the same village and worked during the day, and then they had nothing else to do, and so Sabbath would make sense. And that's how I always viewed it. So if, when my son's having seizures all night and every night, and I could not find a day to take a breather or recover, I started to just kind of blow it off, like it'll just never happen. And it took me well into my mid-40s before I actually realized that we could make a go at this thing. And one of the things that we did, when I realized why I was working so hard, and there were times I was 80 to 100 hours a week. So, the question, why am I working so hard, was related to my lack of faith, and that I really did think it was up to me. That's why the Sabbath is so important, is because the only way that you can Sabbath as a lifestyle is that you really have to trust. It has almost nothing to do with picking a day of the week to take off. It has to do with this deep embedded trust that the Lord has got your family, he's got your finances, and he's got your identity. And so you actually can relax. And so, to not do business as usual, this was under the assumption that there would be an overarching blessing that would hit their lives if they took a day off. But it wasn't necessarily promised that they would make more money. It was literally that there would be other blessings. It was called shalom. It was the great Hebrew promise for God's people that they would have peace. Okay? And so when God's telling them way back then, don't just do business as usual. Don't just do what all these other people are doing, trying to provide for their family. Actually decide to make less. Like, you'll be happier if you make the decision to downsize. When Cheryl and I lived in Denver in the heyday of our ministry and sort of my public speaking and all that was when I was the most exhausted. And I basically was all over the place because I had to. We needed, and I'm just going to be honest with you guys so you get the numbers, but to live in Denver, I needed $12,000 a month. That was sort of standard middle to upper middle income. And so to afford what we had, the house and where we lived and all the stuff that we were doing, both girls in a high-end hockey program, blah, 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 12 grand was what we needed. And the move to Alton was an intentional downsizing. There were other issues why we came here, but one of the key ones for us is that Cheryl and I thought we might finally be able to actually change our inner life by changing our outer life and downsizing. So we've gotten to where we can almost live off right around $5,500 with kind of a goal of getting down to $3,500. And we've seen that specifically, that downsizing of the practicality of our life, what we need, is what has freed up everything in regards to the Sabbath. I think when I spoke with you guys at the men's retreat, we talked about the term the cruciform way of life, which is in early sort of spiritual formation practices, it was how God's people reframed their lives. And it was based on the downward movement of God. And it's based out of Philippians 2. I just want to read a passage of it to you, because it's saying, like, if you have any comfort from God's love, if you have if you have faith in Jesus, then take on the same mindset of him. And it says, who existed in the form of God, so he was God way up here, but did not regard equality with God something that he was going to take hold of. And so then it said, then he emptied himself, and then he took the form of a man, and even a bondservant and a slave, and he keeps going lower, and he actually goes to the cross and he dies. So we call that the cruciform, the way Jesus comes into the world, even as the king, was not to lord it over us or make us follow him. He basically said, I'm going to give you a new example for how you get to live your life. And it's always a downward journey if you follow Jesus. We might receive upward mobility. We might get the blessings and be able to have stuff, but he always offers us to live a life that's free of the need for all this stuff that we have. And so we get to empty ourselves. And what we see from the scriptures, because Jesus went down, God exalts him to the highest place. And then later throughout most of the New Testament talks about how Jesus takes us with him. And so if we follow him, he takes us low, or at least invites us. The kingdom of heaven, almost every teaching of Jesus about the kingdom of heaven, is to go with him into the lower reaches of existence, if you will, to simplify what we need, to be thankful with far, far less than what our peers have, not to store up treasures here on earth, not to freak out when we lose things, to hold things almost like sand through our fingertips, like he kind of gives it and we can just let it flow through. We're just like vessels, and so we're carefree. There's not anxiety. We don't have to keep striving. And so that's the essence of Sabbatarian cruciform life, is that we have to make some decisions to downsize. When I talk to people, especially men that are just in it, they're in the stress and the anxiety, and I say, would you ever think about even selling your house and just moving to a cheaper spot? It seems like it's an impossible thought. Even when I tell them, well, like Cheryl and I did that. We actually moved, and it freed us up. I'm like a different person. And so, that's what Jesus sometimes asks us to do. Like, remember that story where the rich young ruler comes to Jesus, and he's trying to get Jesus to really speak into his life. And Jesus says, well, yeah, for you, mate, I just think you need to sell everything and give it to the poor. And it says that he went away really sad. That's what I liken to a classic evangelical churchgoer, is that Jesus keeps offering us these, beautiful blessings of life. And we just go, I don't know if I want to make the decision to get there. And so then we just go another 10 years and we're stressed out and freaking out. And, so I think the opportunity, I just didn't want to just talk about Sabbath and not invite you to consider large decisions to free up time and money. So maybe you can actually enjoy God again. So second thing I just want to bring in is the idea of being in a community of shalom, what we call a Sabbatarian community. For many of us, going to church on Sunday was a little bit of a glimmer of a Sabbatarian life, because we would take at least a 2-hour break and we would try to forget everything that was going on. And then we would go to church and we would have fellowship with other brothers and sisters. And it was nice, right? When the building was open before COVID hit, it sort of would recenter things for us. But now that COVID's sustaining, I think we have to go, it's almost like we have to go beyond the Sunday, sort of dip our toe into it and go, somehow Jesus continues to offer us a Sabbath experience, whether we can go to the building or not. But we need to do that in community. That's why sometimes even just a men's group or doing church in some ways as a family with your own wife and kids and grandkids. We have to go to those places. In about an hour, my whole family is going to join us at the Halter House. We do that every Sunday night. And so even if we don't have a church gathering, this is our community of Sabbath. We take a break together. And I want to actually read a quote to you by Dallas Willard. And somebody was this before he died. Dallas was a great kingdom theologian and kind of the one that I really sort of learned everything I found out about the kingdom from. And he's talking about the generation today, that we live in a constant state of dropped outness from the real world and from its history and from community and from the integrity of ourselves. Okay, he's saying that like we lose ourselves in all the pace and all the social media and the iPhones and the constant pace. Says they don't even know that most of them don't know what community means, because community means assuming responsibility for other people. And that means paying attention, not following your own will, but submitting your will and giving up the world of intimacy and power you have in this little consumer world that you've created. And when you look at community in the face and realize that it means raw, skin-to-skin contact with other people for whom you have been responsible, that's when most of us, we just can't go there. So he's basically saying we want community, but we can't have it. The interviewer then asks, do you have any recommendations for someone who is struggling with this constant sort of like it's almost like you're an avatar. You're like going through the motions, but you're not able to really make eye contact with the world. He says you have to think in terms of radical disciplines that will return us and take us out of this world of distraction that we are living in and help us find the center where solitude and silence begins to take over. And he says you have to take yourself out of the place of running your own world. That's what it means to follow Jesus. And there is nothing that I know that can do that other than the practice of lengthy solitude and silence as a community. That will allow you to begin to understand what Sabbath actually means, he says. But most people can't approach Sabbath because they're so revved up and so distracted by so many other things that they think about. But once you have begun to practice and experience solitude and silence, then you will be able to discover that you actually have a soul and that there is a God. Then you can begin to practice Sabbath, and that will enable you to re-enter community. You can't have community without Sabbath. That's what he says at the end. You can't really have deep community without Sabbath, and you can't have Sabbath without community. And so it starts somewhere, guys. Like we actually, in all the things that we want, don't you want community for your family? Of course you do. Don't you want your kids to find deep community? Then they have to begin to learn the ability to come away from the world, even if it's for 5 minutes a day, an hour a day a week, whatever rhythms you can begin to put in. And then they can begin to find the beauty of a Sabbatarian community. That's what church is actually supposed to be. We are the restful people. That's why we said early on in this that the greatest witness of the gospel, maybe in our day, might be that we're a part of a restful community that is not losing our minds and freaking out. And so I'll leave you with this. The scriptures say that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. And all that was saying, he was saying that all the things you thought were wrapped up in the law, doing things to get God's attention and all that, everything was fulfilled in Jesus. So the Sabbath is therefore made for man, not for God. But the Lord of the Sabbath, the ones that understands it and runs it and sort of invites us and gives it to us, is Jesus. So Jesus ultimately isn't a person that tells us to Sabbath and then gets mad when we screw it up. No, Jesus is Sabbath. Jesus is the rest. And this is why if you follow him, if you're tired of the pace that you've been living and you're finally ready, unlike the rich young ruler, to go, Jesus, I'll do anything you want. Like I just want to redo and have the gospel remake my life. Then go to Jesus. Because when you go to Jesus, he's restful. He's not anxious. He's not riddled in anxiety and hurry and worry. That's just not a part of who he is. It's not even in his character. And so when you choose to follow him, he will take you, what's he say? That Psalm 23, he leads us beside still waters. That's just kind of where this shepherd takes you. And even though some of those places he also takes us are dangerous, when we're with him, we don't have to be anxious and feel like we're in danger. We're like totally safe. And whether or not COVID relents in 2 months or it takes another 20 years, there's something about walking with Jesus, the restful one, that is really all we need. And you just have to settle the issue in your heart that you're just not going to go again another 10, 20 years to figure out Sabbatarian life. It will be literally the life from which you live from. Jesus, Lord of the Sabbath. If he's your Lord, and he says Sabbath, top 2 things I want you guys to do to fix your world and bring some hope to the rest of the world, then maybe we just can't go through, get past this and just go on to the next study. So I'd really ask you this week to read all of Isaiah 58 by yourself. Read it as you guys are going through this together, and really talk through to the depth at which this is getting into your soul. And hopefully we can become a community of Sabbath and offer that to the world. So love you guys. Have a great week, and we will see you soon.